when 9-year-old Marcus stepped onto that dimly lit school stage in Gary, Indiana, on that October evening in 1987, the same city where Michael Jackson grew up. He had no idea that the king of pop himself was sitting in a limousine just outside, wrestling with his own demons of fame and isolation. As the crowd's cruel laughter erupted, and Marcus's voice cracked on the high notes of Billie Jean, something extraordinary was about to unfold that would change both their lives forever. But what happened when the world's biggest superstar made a choice that revealed the man behind the glittering glove? And why did this single moment of human connection become the most powerful performance of Michael's entire career? The unforgiving stage lighting of Roosevelt Middle School's gymnasium cast long shadows across the faded basketball court lines, transforming the familiar space into something that felt both magical and unforgiving. Parents balanced precariously on metal folding chairs that squeaked with every shift, their conversations creating a low hum that mixed with the crackle of the temperamental sound system. Children peeked through makeshift curtains fashioned from bedsheets, their nervous energy palpable as they adjusted costumes made from kitchen towels and cardboard crowns. Outside, in the autumn evening air, a black limousine sat idling beneath the amber glow of a streetlight, its tinted windows reflecting the warm light spilling from the school's entrance. The vehicle seemed out of place on Jackson Street, where modest homes lined the cracked sidewalks, and where dreams often felt as distant as the stars barely visible through Gary's industrial haze. Inside the car, Michael Jackson pressed his gloved hand against the cool glass, watching families stream into the building he remembered from his own childhood. The sound of children's laughter and off-key piano scales drifted through the autumn air, stirring something deep within him that fame had nearly buried. His security detail shifted uncomfortably in the front seats, exchanging glances in the rearview mirror, as their charge made no move to leave this unremarkable street in this forgotten corner of his past. They had been driving back from a private visit to his mother when the sound of music had drawn him here, to this place where it all began, where the Jackson 5 had once performed on stages just like the one inside. The irony wasn't lost on him. Here sat the man who had conquered the world's biggest arenas, mesmerized by the simple authenticity of a school talent show. Inside the makeshift theater, 9-year-old Marcus Williams stood behind the curtain, his small hands trembling as he gripped the microphone that seemed too large for his fingers. His mother had sewn sequins onto his black performance jacket in an attempt to recreate the iconic look he'd seen in music videos. But under the stark overhead illumination, the homemade costume looked more like a child's desperate wish than a tribute to greatness. The other children whispered among themselves, some snickering at his ambitious song choice, while others watched with the mixture of envy and respect that comes when someone dares to reach for something beyond their grasp. The MC, a well-meaning teacher whose voice carried the weariness of someone who had seen too many dreams crash against reality, announced Marcus's name with forced enthusiasm. As the opening notes of Billie Jean began to play from the boombox, positioned precariously on a folding table, the audience settled into an expectant silence. Some parents leaned forward with genuine curiosity, while others checked their watches, calculating how many more acts stood between them and the comfort of their living rooms. None of them could have imagined that outside, in the shadows of their ordinary evening, sat someone who would transform this moment from a simple school performance into something that would echo through their memories for the rest of their lives. Michael's fingers traced the edge of his fedora as he watched the school's entrance, remembering the weight of performing at that same age, when music was still pure joy rather than the complex machinery of fame it had become. The past year had been relentless. The pressure following Thriller's unprecedented success, the constant scrutiny that turned every public appearance into a performance, the growing isolation that made genuine human connection feel like a luxury he could no longer afford. Even this simple drive through his hometown had required careful planning, unmarked cars, and routes designed to avoid the photographers who hunted him like prey. The Bad World Tour had been triumphant but exhausting, each show a perfectly choreographed spectacle that left little room for spontaneity or the raw connection he'd once felt with his audience. He found himself longing for the days when music was about more than magazine covers and record sales, when a performance could be a conversation between souls rather than a product delivered to consumers. His hands, hidden beneath the gloves that had become his trademark, bore the calluses of countless rehearsals, but lately they felt disconnected from the music that had once flowed through them like a river. The transformation of his appearance had become a source of constant speculation and cruel commentary, each change dissected by tabloids that seemed more interested in his struggles than his artistry. What they couldn't understand was that beneath the surgical alterations and carefully crafted image lived a man who simply wanted to disappear into his music, to find the child who had once danced in this very neighborhood without worrying about cameras or critics. The irony was that in trying to create the perfect performer, he had lost touch with the imperfect human being who had made the magic possible in the first place. His security chief's voice crackled through the intercom, suggesting they move on before someone recognized the vehicle. But Michael held up a hand for silence. Through the car's tinted windows, he could see the silhouettes of families moving through the school's hallways, parents recording their children's performances on camcorders that would preserve these moments long after the applause faded. A quality of reverence surrounded their ordinariness, their lack of pretense, their willingness to celebrate small victories in a world that often demanded perfection. The weight of expectation had become suffocating. Every song had to be a hit. Every video had to break new ground. Every public appearance had to reinforce the mythology that had grown around him like a beautiful prison. He thought about the children inside, performing without the burden of his legacy, free to fail and try again without the world watching. Their innocence reminded him of what he had lost somewhere between the Ed Sullivan Show and the cover of Time magazine, between the first moonwalk and the 1,000th perfect performance. As the sounds of music and laughter continued to drift from the school, Michael felt something shift inside him. A recognition that perhaps what he needed wasn't another perfectly executed show, but a moment of genuine connection, a chance to remember why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. The boy inside the building was about to discover that sometimes our heroes are closer than we think, waiting in the shadows, not as untouchable icons, but as fellow travelers seeking the same thing we all crave, the simple joy of being heard and understood. Meanwhile, inside the makeshift theater, the moment Michael had been unconsciously dreading was about to unfold. Marcus stepped into the harsh spotlight, his glittering costume catching the light in ways that made him look both magical and vulnerable, like a small bird trying to imitate an eagle's flight. The opening synthesizer notes of Billie Jean filled the gymnasium with their instantly recognizable pulse, and for a moment, the room held its breath in anticipation. His voice began strong, clear, carrying the melody with surprising confidence as parents shifted forward in their seats, impressed despite themselves by the young boy's ambition and early success. But as the song progressed toward its soaring chorus, Marcus's untrained voice began to strain against the demands of Jackson's sophisticated vocal arrangements. The high notes that Michael delivered with effortless precision became mountains too steep for the child to climb, and his voice faltered audibly on Billie Jean is Not My Lover, the words breaking apart like glass hitting concrete. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter began in the back rows, spreading through the audience like a virus of cruelty that infected even the kindest hearts. The laughter grew bolder, more pointed, as Marcus struggled to regain his composure and continue the song. Children in the audience began to giggle openly, while their parents made little effort to silence them, some even joining in with poorly concealed smirks and whispered comments about the boy's overambitious song choice. The music continued its relentless march forward, but Marcus's voice became smaller and smaller, his confidence crumbling with each note until he was barely whispering the lyrics that had once filled him with such joy. Outside in the limousine, Michael heard the shift in the crowd's energy, even through the car's insulated walls. The supportive murmur had transformed into something sharper, more predatory, and he recognized the sound immediately. It was the same cruel laughter that had followed him through his own childhood, magnified by tabloid headlines and late-night television jokes. His jaw tightened as he watched the light from the gymnasium windows, knowing without seeing that someone inside was experiencing the particular agony of public humiliation that he understood better than anyone. Inside the auditorium space, Marcus had stopped singing entirely, standing frozen in the spotlight as tears began to streak down his cheeks. The backing track continued to play, creating an awful contrast between the song's confident declaration and the small boy's visible collapse. Some parents began to look uncomfortable, recognizing that their laughter had crossed a line from harmless amusement to genuine cruelty, but the damage was already done. The MC started moving toward the stage, clearly intending to end the performance and save the child from further embarrassment. Michael's hand was already on the door handle before he consciously decided to move. An instinct deep within him had awakened, a protective instinct that transcended his carefully managed public image and security concerns. This wasn't about publicity or career strategy. This was about a child experiencing the same isolation and mockery that had shaped his own relationship with performance and vulnerability. As his security team called his name in alarm, Michael stepped out of the limousine and walked toward the school's entrance, leaving behind the safety of anonymity for something far more dangerous and infinitely more important. The autumn air felt sharp against his skin as he moved through the shadows, his footsteps silent but purposeful. Behind him, his security scrambled to follow, but Michael had already crossed an invisible threshold. He was no longer the king of pop, calculating the risks of an unplanned public appearance. He was simply a man who had once been a vulnerable child, walking toward another child who needed to know he wasn't alone. Within moments of entering the building, Michael moved with purpose toward the stage. Michael slipped through the school's back entrance like a whisper, his presence rippling through the small crowd of volunteers and waiting performers who stood frozen in disbelief. But instead of the chaos that usually followed his appearances, but an unexpected calm descended. Perhaps it was the tears still visible on Marcus's face, or the sacred quality of the moment, but the people backstage instinctively understood that they were witnessing something more important than a celebrity sighting. They stepped aside wordlessly, creating a path toward the stage, where the boy still stood trembling in the dying spotlight. Marcus had his back to the curtain when Michael appeared beside him, moving with the fluid grace that had made him famous, but tempered now with a gentleness that few had ever seen. Instead of grand gestures or theatrical entrances, Michael simply knelt down to the child's eye level, his signature rhinestone glove catching the light as he placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. The auditorium space fell into a silence so complete that the hum of the glaring theater spots became audible, as if the entire universe had paused to witness this impossible convergence of dreams and reality. "May I sing with you?" Michael whispered, his voice carrying just far enough for the boy to hear, but soft enough to feel like a secret shared between friends. Marcus turned slowly, his tear-stained face reflecting a mixture of disbelief and hope that transformed his expression from despair to wonder in the span of a heartbeat. Michael's smile, genuine, warm, untouched by the careful calculation of his public appearances, told the boy everything he needed to know about what was happening. Together, they stood at the microphone, as Michael gestured for the music to begin again. This time, when the familiar opening notes filled the air, they carried a different energy entirely. Michael's voice joined Marcus's from the very first word, not overwhelming or overshadowing the child's contribution, but lifting it, supporting it, transforming their duet into something greater than either could achieve alone. Marcus's voice, which had wavered under the pressure of solo performance, found new strength when woven together with his heroes, creating harmonies that seemed to heal the wounds inflicted by the earlier mockery. The audience, which had been cruel in their laughter just moments before, now sat transfixed by the impossible beauty of what they were witnessing. Parents reached for their children's hands, recognizing that they were seeing something that would live in their memories long after the sequence had faded and the music had ended. Some wept openly, understanding that they had been part of something that diminished a child's spirit, and were now witnessing its restoration through an act of pure grace. As the song reached its conclusion, Michael wrapped his arm around Marcus's shoulders, both of them taking the final bow together as the converted performance hall erupted in applause that felt different from any either had ever received. This wasn't the screaming adulation of fans or the polite appreciation of an audience, but the recognition of something authentically human and beautiful. When the music finally faded, Michael knelt once more beside Marcus, whispered something that made the boy's face light up with pure joy, and then slipped away as quietly as he had come. By the time the audience fully processed what had happened, Michael was already walking back toward his limousine, leaving behind a moment that would ripple through Marcus's life and the lives of everyone who witnessed it. The boy would grow up to become a music teacher, carrying forward the lesson that true greatness reveals itself not in perfection, but in compassion, not in standing apart, but in lifting others up. And somewhere in the autumn darkness of Gary, Indiana, the king of pop had rediscovered something he had almost lost: the simple, transformative power of one human being choosing to see and heal another's pain.